Welcome to Still Plays Galaxy of Heroes. Merry Christmas, everyone. This is a Grand Arena, the penultimate match of Season 34. Right now, we are in Kyber 3, but we're going to have to win out in order to finish the season in a Kyber 2. Either any combination of winning this one and losing the next, or losing this one and winning the next, though neither of those are going to secure us a Kyber 2 finish. So we're just working to win out this time. Quick recap, nothing really to say. No real surprises here because my opponent did not really participate, which I was expecting from his Grand Arena history. He had inconsistent participation, and that is what proved out. I did expect an attack or two. He did set down a very difficult defense, so that video is worth checking out. I thought it was a pretty good performance on my end, getting through 4 out of his 6 GLs on defense, and then there were a few other tough squads that I had to punch through. And we also had some good testing to come out of that, including the Traya Omicron, where first thing I wanted to try out was Nihilus Lead. I have been doing so many takes. There's a lot of noise going outside the window this Christmas Eve. Lots of cars blaring music. Let's see if we can get a good cut this time. Gundam is my opponent. Pretty tough roster, but there are a number of places where I measure up pretty favorably and have the advantage. Omicron's being one of those places. He has a very light amount of Omicrons for this point in Kyber. At only 7 Grand Arena Amis, that's a place where I'm standing it pretty well with 12. He has 6 GLs though. That's going to be tough, and from his Grand Arena history, he likes to set them on defense. Relic units, he's standing good at one of the higher counts for this bracket, but a little shallower at 169 Gear 11 plus units. That's just a good metric for usable depth, but it's also a little misleading. I think some of that, a big percentage of that is going to be attributed to the Grand Arena requirements, I think, and you'll see why when we get a little further down here with what the rest of his roster looks like. Mods, another location where I'm doing pretty well, although he's pretty good at the high end for his mods. It's just with the top 500 averages where I measure up a bit better, and he has some pretty decent counts with the 15 plus, 20 plus, and 25 plus. I think part of the reason his average is a little lower though is because he just has a lot of 6-dot mods that are probably not what I would consider 6-dot worthy. Datacrons, very weak. The 2 Datacrons he has are level 9. He either sold off a bunch of Datacrons or just did rerolls until he got what he liked, which is an expensive way to do things. The rest of this bracket as it stands, I already know the results of this, so I'm not going to spend too much time on these people because we're not going to face them in the final round. The GLs he has, he does not have Lord Vader, but he does have Jabba, and he does set his job on defense. So this is going to be pretty tough. But here's where things get interesting. Look at what he doesn't have. No Raddus, no Iden, no Starkiller, no Dash. I've got all of that. So there are some key squads that he is missing, which is going to make things much easier for me. And it probably means he's going to get shallow pretty quick. On top of that, no Traya Omicron, no SWGOH Ami. All of that is going to help me out. And no solo, not as that is important. But also notable, no Maul and no Cat, which is shocking at this stage. And obviously, if he has no Raddus, no Profundity, we're going to move on to the Grand Arena bracket, the Hotbot. We are going to move on to the Hotbot. Let's hope I remember to cut that out. With the Hotbot here, you can see a lot of green on my side. What we are looking at is I'm in a slightly larger guild. The clears and undersizes, this is that serious metric I like to highlight, very low. Tiny amounts on the clears, very low on the undersizes. The relic distribution, which is the next thing I like to highlight, It's pretty well distributed where he's not too top heavy considering the accounts that he has, but he just has a lot, which is going to make things difficult for me. And then it's also what he has at Relic 8 and Relic 9. He just has the important characters, so all of his GLs are at least at Relic 8 except for Sith Eternal Emperor. His Malgus is at Relic 9, but you can see I have some speed advantages on a number of characters. Now taking a look at how the depth of his 300 speed characters, I should just keep things out of my hands. He has, I think it was 16, maybe it was slightly more. Yeah, it's his Echo, so he's at 20. He attacked first. The only things to note are we have a Relic Sith Trooper. I mentioned that in the last video. He did need, he hasn't done that yet. So he took a couple shots, nothing big. All this is the same from the last video. Nothing major. The big change here is Executor to defense. Should have done that a long time ago. It was because when the Profundity was new and I had it at 4 stars, I set it on defense because it wasn't reliable for me to take out the Executor. And now that more people are familiar with the Profundity, it shouldn't be there anymore. When people were unfamiliar with it, it did great for me on defense, but that's the advantages of unlocking things early. You get a bump in holds from just lack of community familiarity. Now with my opponent's defense, SLKR, Malgus, Rey, and then a little easiness with the Grievous, and then down below Jabba, CLS, JML, and JMK. So a really tough bracket. The way that I'm thinking about things here is we're going to have to do Starkiller up against either the JML or the Rey. Gas is an option up against the Rey, but I'm probably going to want to try him up against the Malgus. We're going to need some luck up against SLKR because I don't want to use up some of my counters on cleanup. And then JMK and JML, we'll have to see where that gets. But my JML gets pretty weak after I do a JKR, JKL counter, and if gas is going elsewhere. And my JML is, at that point, not with a lot of good supporting Jedi. Now, Jabba here, I'm going to hope to get some decent RNG and do a Lord Vader solo with the Datacron. The issue here is you can get cooldown, so I was thinking, okay, maybe I throw down the TIE Pilot, maybe he absorbs some hits so I don't get affected by the cooldown reduction, but then I changed my mind at the last minute. I think I should have just went with my instincts and left it on, because we don't get the RNG I need. Our cooldowns increase, and we can't win it at that stage. So that I should have just went slightly safer. Maybe it wouldn't have changed anything, but that was the gamble I took. Now, before using the GLs, we should go to the big screen. And this portion here is being recorded at a different time, and that's why I'm switching to hair up to indicate that. I was going to post this video several days ago, and then I realized I cut it wrong, or I didn't record this portion here. Nothing really happens, but for completeness, I want to include a couple battles that I don't know how I went through the first record and left these out. But standard easy stuff, Bad Batch, Gear 11 up against this mixed Relic Grievous Squad. Counter you see me use all the time. It's pretty safe. If you hit an average Relic level of Relic 5, I don't like to do it anymore. That's when it starts to fail. The big key move, I've been talking about this in several videos, but you never know when somebody catches a battle at a different time. This is the key move, Hunter selecting Omega. Before I started swapping that way, I would lose this much more often. But swapping to that heal, making sure there's that protection up before Meduloid Monstrosity happens too much, that's the big move for using Gear 11 Bad Batch. And I've been much more consistent. As long as I'm careful with picking my battles, we're at like, I don't know, 90% success rates using this counter. Above Relic 5, then I'll just use something else a little safer. then they do a little too much damage for gear 11 to take it. Now this next one here, SLKR. Other standard thing, a little risky though. This is the whole thing with this match. I needed a Christmas miracle in order to really have a shot at it. And at this point in the match, we already missed out on some of those miracles. But here's a lot of the rest of my Jedi being consumed for this counter. And whenever this goes well for me, it usually means my opponent has weaker mods on this squad. Because usually I need to clean it up. Which I think I don't in this one. We're doing this like a week late. We take out Sith Trooper, start focusing on Kylo. We take Kylo down on one hit, which is nice, doesn't always happen. Stormtrooper, real close. But also my Revan's still alive. That's usually not the case, because really this counter I probably should have higher relics on my Revan. But to be at this point with my JKR alive never happens. And that makes a big difference. And so here we go, successful. I'm gonna guess my opponent's mods were a little weaker on that squad. Alright, with Rey here, I wanted to do gas, but it's just wasn't going to be likely, and I think that's what I start out here looking. And I decided I'm going to use Starkiller, even though I was initially thinking Starkiller was going to be my JML counter. Part of it is because I need to use gas up against Malgus, because I don't see how I'm getting past Malgus without using JMK then. So it has to be gas, and gas at least doing a little bit of work, even if he doesn't completely take him out. So that's why this is the specific division of counters that I'm using. Although, maybe I should just get Malgus for offense, because then Malgus with Traya, that could have been doing some work up against probably JML. I don't know if it would have done some stuff. And then the Traya counter for Malgus, I just don't, and it's not a counter, but it can take out a lot of the characters. At least soften up Malgus enough. It's just gear 12 is not really the level for that. But this is going pretty well for me. I think part of this is just mods. We're just calling in as many assists as we can. Now I just gotta kill a little time until she attacks, so I'm just making sure we get to the Starkiller big attack, but waiting until we use it, obviously. I don't know if the mic picked up on that, but that's just more what I was talking about with all these motorcycles and other vehicles going by the window. I've talked about this before, but I've got this stretch of road outside that people love to just drive really fast down. So that went pretty well, but that right there is what went great. Just doing basics for a little bit until the turn meter happens, because otherwise it was going to take too long. Then we took the auto off. And there we go. It worked out nice. Usually you don't see me use that counter too often because I don't have Visas at relics. So I like to be a little bit more careful, because sometimes it doesn't go well for me. And because I only have one Omicron on Starkiller. So I try to, when I'm countering GLs, I want to usually take a safer counter, which is why you usually see me take GLs up against GLs. If it's if we're looking at a GL defense, that's only like 2 or 3. But now we're dealing with a 5 GL defense. And for me to get through this requires me to do things that have a little bit more risk to them than I try when I'm working with those. Because the issue with a GL, if you mess up the counter or if it goes poorly, you don't get the right RNG, then you're using another high-powered counter. Like, I'm perfectly fine just throwing in weak counters up against weaker squads. But GLs, I don't play that way. Now you can already see, this one's not going as well for me as it was like I don't know if it was last match, but at least last week we had a few of these go pretty well. With different relic levels, different mods, maybe it goes better, but this is also a Relic 9 Malgus, which changes things a little bit. So it kind of blows up on me, but we take out Malik. That helps. That's part of the reason why I chose this counter. Even if it didn't go well, it was at least going to do work. I think I make the wrong decision here. I decided to stay focused on Fallen because I want to get rid of Corrupted Battle Meditation on another counter, but I think maybe I would have been able to take out Darth Revan had I stayed focused there. But we have this territory down to a single squad, which is good. Now the way that I'm going to approach this cleanup is I'm going to Traya it. I thought about it whether or not I was going to do a Traya lead or a Nihilus lead, because what I like about Nihilus is the potential for using Annihilate right away, and that's why I'm clicking on the different leaders and thinking about it. But ultimately, I go with Traya, partly because I watched enough footage to know that even if it doesn't win, it's going to do decently. And because I want to be able to dispel the buffs, which is only under her leadership. Which I think is part of the reason why they're more survivable. But the downside is, and part of this is the functionality with her Omicron, is it's really difficult to trigger the cooldown refresh on Scion and on Nihilus from the Omicron functionality. Like, we have to wait for the cooldowns to happen, which for Nihilus isn't a huge deal because we just hit those cooldowns. And with Malgus in particular, because of the cooldown manipulation mechanics within the kit, the Nihilus lead may not have ever worked the way that I would have hoped or wanted. We're going to test it out again in the future, but this wasn't the match for it, because I couldn't afford to lose this squad. So I went a little safer. Without Malik in here, it's certainly much easier. And now Malgus being taken out, it's fine. And what the Omicron has really done is eliminate any risk that somebody's going to be taken out. But really, I probably should just auto it. I don't think I do, from what I recall, but essentially we're not taking anybody out until Annihilates. I should really just auto it. But it's nice being able to take two weaker squads. It's just, weaker's the wrong word, but take 2 non-top squads. The only issue is we don't really know how good Traya is. Traya's like already really good. And those geo level counters are really what she's going to need to be used for. Now, Lord Vader wasn't here, so we never test that. Maybe next round. I forget if my opponent has. So my opponent is attacking. He cleared everybody but Bam. Took 1 attempt up against Bam. I was hoping he was done, but he's going to keep going. And I take a break. No, I think we play for a few more battles, but I'm going to take a break, at a certain point when I was playing this. Now, CLS here, I'm going to try something, and it kind of works, but I mess it up because it was a little unfamiliar to me. So we're doing Maul. Maul's pretty risky up against CLS. It's very dependent on who Han goes after, but this is Hondo changes things, and Hondo probably should be the one to be used with Maul now. That's kind of where things are falling. But mine's gear 11. He does have the Omicron though, which is needed for this because of the turn meter mechanics. But I also make a mistake while we do this. So we're going to give it a go, and you'll see it do pretty well. And then I'm just going to mess it up because I didn't remember exactly how Hondo works. So I'm going to throw this over on Han because you don't want to take out the person who has captive, except I thought it was... So you're going to see me ignore captive at first, and that's going to be the right choice. I'm going to focus on Chewie. We're not doing the AoE because I don't want to trigger the counters. Because you can see we already lost Bo. And this is what I was saying with if Han chooses the wrong people early, it's going to go poorly. And he took out our heal by taking out Bo. So you see me staying focused with the basic. And this is... Because we have 26 stacks of... Oh, I guess it's stacks protection up, not the... That's why I messed it up. That's why. Okay. I'm understanding what I did wrong now. So I'm attacking Han right now, and what I should have done is just let that come off on its own. But I was looking at the protection up and thinking the protection up was the stacks we needed, but that's not what we need. There's this. You need more than 5 of the. I don't know what it's called. The captive or whatever. You have to have 5 or more on Hondo, and I saw the protection up stacks and switched them in my head. That's what I did wrong. I get it now. So that could have gone well had I played it right, but this is the first time I've used that. And because we can't test things outside of Grand Arena, sometimes we learn on while we play. Now, JTR is a great CLS counter prior to Chupio being around. Chupio kind of changed that. Not that it's the totality of the squad though. Without Han here, without Chewie, like JTR is going to be fine. Especially without Han. Without Han shoots first. And now with everyone focused on Ben, we're fine. I'm going to relic him pretty soon. So he cleared this front wall, took 2 shots up against my own CLS. And he, remember, is shallower than I am, so we can see him going at this. So I left for a little bit just to take a break, and it was in the middle of my day, so it wasn't the best time for me to record. And then when I returned, he had cleared the back wall. And this was a pretty weak area, so we don't get any holds. But up here, bam, 4 holds. Pretty good. And it's probably because he's out of squads, which, if you remember from looking at the bracket and looking at the hotbot, how shallow he was. But he still cleared 2 territories, and we have GLs to get through, and fleet's not going to be enough. That territory is just, it's not worth as much as the other back wall. Plus, we're taking more attempts. Now, we have some choices to make. The choice is, where do we take the JMK? And I decided to take the JMK up against the JML because, remember, he doesn't have cat. So his JMK team is weaker. But I'm going to make a strategic error here, because I have Padme on this squad. And that was a mistake. I didn't think about it at the time, but afterwards, thinking about it, I should have kept Padme, because we could have thrown Padme at JMK. Even though we don't have good characters to pair with her, maybe it wouldn't have made any difference. But it would have been worth trying, because he can't take out Padme. So maybe it would have just been a timeout, because we don't have like Anakin or Ahsoka to pair with Padme. But it would have been worth something to try. Now this is overpowered. We're going to be fine here. There's nothing really to consider. I should have been... What I could have done, because you see me, I didn't do the instant cooldown on Cat to start, and that's partly because I'm used to other Jedi typically. So not somebody who can taunt. So I'm usually stuck behind JML. But I could have thrown it at Mace. I just didn't think about it in the moment. It doesn't ultimately change anything, though. This is just standard stuff. Yeah, and we're on auto from here. But, see, I don't think my JML would have taken out his, and maybe that was the wrong way to think about it, because we wouldn't have been able to take him out. No. Part of the reason I do it this way is what I'm hoping for is my JML to soften up enough of this JMK that I can Wampa. Because Wampa doesn't work up against JML, because JML just keeps increasing cooldowns, throws on days that Wampa will never counter. Wampa can clean up JMK. I don't... And with Cat, obviously, it wouldn't work. But Wampa is worth trying out here. So I'm hoping that my JML will at least do a little bit of work so I can throw Wampa in later. And that's actually something you're going to want to skip ahead into, because I don't do that until later. And I don't do it up. I ultimately decide not to use it here because I wanted to test Wampa up against Jabba is what I decided I wanted to do. And that's because of the Datacron, the protection of Datacron, which works really nicely with Wampa. So it's interesting. It's an interesting battle. And I think at Relic 8 or Relic 9, mine's at Relic 7, but at Relic 8 or Relic 9 could have been even more interesting. It's definitely worth looking at and paying attention to and trying to build off of. But this never really gets... like, this really needs JKR, maybe JK. It needs like a big gun, and we just don't have it. Yeah, I think we're just going to talk over this because there's not much to address here. I think there's a few shows I didn't talk too much about this year. Partly because I just watched them a little bit later than everyone. So like Spider-Man No Way Home and The Batman, that I feel like I should get my thoughts down. I don't think this is the video for it. But just like, I guess here's a quick version on it. No Way Home is massively overrated. I don't know what people, like I think the spectacle of seeing it in the theater was probably a lot of fun, but there's no movie there. I wasn't really a fan. The Batman was great, but I see what people were saying, and I can see why some people love it and why some people don't. It's probably the second Batman. Here's the thing with it. It's probably my favorite Batman, but it's not my favorite Batman movie. Because as a movie, it's overly long. There's a lot of things that are left undeveloped. I think it was doing way too much. Probably too many villains. I think it would have been a great show. It's the Batman show I always wanted, and I feel like it could have been great at like 5 or 6 episodes, and a 3-hour movie is just a little short and unfinished. We'll talk more about it in a second. I got more to say about it. I think we're going to transition to Fleet now. Yeah, but with the amount of attempts we've had to take, where we've had to two-shot several squads, and with how this territory, maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe I don't remember how many banners this is worth. I feel like it's worth less. Maybe it's not. Oh, that was probably before. Yeah, it's probably worth the same now, but before the increase in fleet defenses, it was probably worth less because it was only 2 teams versus 3 before. So, Profundity, the Executor. This is pretty safe and good now. And with players being more familiar and comfortable against it, it's the time where you could get some cheap wins on defense. We're past. As if your opponent has enough teams. If they're shallow, you can still do it. But we'll get back to talking about the Batman because this is just stay alive until you can do the capital ship ultimate and pull away the Executor. But so the movie itself, the Batman, has a lot of problems where the Dark Knight is just, it's a very tight movie, especially in comparison. But Christian Bale's Batman, there's issues with it. It's not my favorite depiction. I really liked this Pattinson version. The individual pieces of the Batman are pretty fantastic. And I didn't just watch it. I watched it a little bit ago. I just rewatched it. I just never talked about it before. And I'm looking forward to the new movie and this rumored television show. Because all those pieces were really well thought out. The detective version of Batman, those are more my preferred stories with the comics. I kind of got off my track. The Spider-Man movie, though, just a fun spectacle, but don't think about it too much. It's one of those things, like the bad version of this is Rise of Skywalker, where they throw so much stuff at the screen so quickly where you don't spend too much time thinking about it. You kind of have fun, but the moment you start thinking about things, everything falls apart. That's how I felt about Spider-Man. I don't know. I'm a Homecoming fan. And I like Far From Home. I like both those movies quite a bit. So I thought about using Malevolence up against Rebels, because, or not Rebels, the Sith or the Empire, because that Empire fleet can be very tough to deal with, especially when you're using weaker counters. And what I have remaining after this are going to be weaker counters. And I've gotten stuck before up against it. But it ultimately came down to turn meter. I decided to go for the stun, and we got it, which is good. Everybody though has daze, so I just use a basic. We get one nice big hit. That's a Gear 12 silencer. Call out the Special Forces for the assist, and we take out the TIE Bomber, which is huge. Get a nice hit on Vader. He heals up, but at least we're in a position where he's not at 100%. And the Sith Bomber will be starting next time, and that's a better scenario than the TIE Bomber. Now we're bringing in Raddus. Not ideal, but pretty good. Couple quick hits, but this is going pretty well so far. We got a lot of concussion bombs over on the Sith Bomber. I'm going to call in the assists and heal up a little bit. But things are getting a little rough. I bring out Sarge because I need somebody taunting. Vader's gone. That's another huge domino. But now we have TIE Interceptor. And he does have relics on his seconds. This guy's ready for Grand Inquisitor. And as soon as the Interceptor comes out, what looked like a pretty good match is kind of falling apart. And we gotta take out seconds, but we're not doing enough damage at these gear levels, but we do take it out and then get blown up, which is tough. Because now, even though there's only one, well, I guess there's a reinforcement too, but all we have is mace and nonsense ships. Like, I really got to give it to Mace this battle, because this is one of the advantages of having gear 11 on every pilot, which I just was able to achieve recently. These pilots all had gear 11 prior, but all my pilots are gear 11 minimum. I'm just trying to figure out what's going to be the most survivable route. Maybe I shouldn't have done that, because that Dispel would be better right now, but I wasn't expecting the Scimitar. We land target lock, which is nice. We're going to throw some protection up. Lose the Reaper. I'm going after Scimitar because I don't want to risk dodges and lose. And that was huge. And somehow we clear that territory. Really happy with Mace pulling that out. And now for the Wampa battle. Just trying to decide where I want to use it. And I'm going to go with Jabba because I want to see what happens. So here's the Datacron. It's the dots cause protection up Datacron. There it is. And it stacks. And really, I want to know what this does up against Jabba. So we go in. And I'm pretty impressed with it. Like, maybe it never would work with, like, the stacking my kind of scum. This battle is going to just get worse and harder the more it goes on. And it looks bad. But you can see there's a lot of dots. We got protection up again. And this is what I mean, where I wonder at Relic 8, Relic 9 how this would have done. Like, maybe it would have worked better. Maybe, I know some of the other players have thrown on some tenacity. Maybe there's enough potency up that that might not matter. But Bosch goes down to dots. Embo and Skiff Lando have almost gone down to dots. There goes Lando, and is feeling pretty good. Like Embo, so close to going down. And I'm trying to decide which one's going to keep me alive, most likely. And there we go down. I'm going to show one more battle, but we're basically done here. I throw in Fennec. I do a few more battles, but we're not going to show them all. It's just this one makes a little progress, so it's worth looking at. I do Fennec lead, but Bosch was probably the right call. And I think I needed what do I call? Okay, so we do that. The thing is, maybe with relics or something on grief, but we lose grief, so we can't get the contract off. And without getting the contract off, we're in a pretty tough position. Close, though. There's the contract. And I think maybe I should have brought in Mando. Even though we probably would have lost Mando, but there's no way to take out Chrysanthemum. There's nothing left on my roster that could have done it. And so we made some progress there, but that's it. That's the last thing we're going to show. I throw in other squads for fun to see what'll happen, but we don't learn anything from it. Your standard nonsense up against a GL kind of results. And that's where this one ends up. Tight banner loss, but there wasn't a way for me to be more efficient and to win this. I would have needed Vader to go right. Had Vader gone right, maybe. Like, it's not, like, if we would have gotten Vader, we would have gotten through Jabba, and then I could have maybe thrown Wampa up against JMK, and we take JMK, but we would have needed taken out both, because it's the 60 banners wouldn't have been enough to catch up to, well, I guess it wouldn't have been 60, it would have been 30 banners to make it from the single win. So we would need to clear the territory in order to beat them. But 5 GLs on defense is kind of pushing what we can do. And I just finished the farm on Bosch, so I'm actually going to be having my own Jabba unlocked pretty soon. And my roster is going to look pretty different. So the end of me having these kinds of deficits is probably near in the future. But thank you for watching. Be safe out there, everyone. Merry Christmas. This is Still Plays Galaxy of Heroes.